Hey folks, welcome back to the Cotswold Collectibles YouTube channel. I'm Greg Brown, owner of Cotswold Collectibles. We brought David Howard back because he's got a lot of information about the Painted Hair series of G.I. Joes, which I'm not very knowledgeable about, especially not as knowledgeable as David. But this particular episode, we're going to talk about the Soldiers of the World series from G.I. Joe that came out from 1966 and only lasted 1 year. So, David, take it away.
So, Greg, I brought what is my favorite part of the G.I. Joe line. I love of course, the basic military sets, but I in particular really love the Foreign Soldiers of the World set. And Hasbro created this set in 1966 because up to that point, G.I. Joe had never had an adversary. So they created some adversaries for him, and it was also the first time that they deviated from the regular G.I. Joe sculpt and made two custom sculpts just for this line. Now, I love this line, but unfortunately it wasn't a big seller. It didn't do well in the stores. They ended up having so much stock left over that you found some of the foreign soldiers dressed up as 1967 talkers.
Right.
He came out in 67, they had foreign heads, and then you found some of the Sears and Roebuck G.I. Joes dressed in French resistant fighter outfits and different loose outfits. So, and then later on there were a couple of warehouse finds of accessories and those types of things. So they had a lot of this left over. They did backyard patrol bags, trying to get rid of the excess inventory because it didn't sell well, which is unfortunate because it's a very creative line. I brought some of my collection today so I could show not only the line of Soldiers of the World, but some of the variations, because it has some subtle but interesting variations in the set. It's the sculpt was actually done by Virginia Gardner Perry, and Virginia Perry Gardner.
Okay.
Anyway,
gotcha.
Virginia did it, and she created the Nordic sculpt, and then they went on to create a Japanese sculpt that was custom for that particular soldier. But the Nordic sculpt came in red, blonde, brown, and head colors and different eye colors, and they were just varied between the sets. Now these sets came out in window boxes with all the accessories, the deluxe window box. They also came as individual coffin box soldiers
on the figures,
and then they had small accessory card sets to go with that.
Gotcha.
So it was marketed a lot of different ways. And then in '67, when they started doing some of the combo sets, they did a combo set of foreign soldiers, and there were like 3 guys in there. And so they really, marketed them in a lot of different ways, and they look really cool in the window boxes.
When they were doing the figure sets, the figures with the uniforms, were there, especially for the Nordic ones, were there any particular hair colors that were specific to a figure, or was it just whatever was packed with it?
Just whatever. In all the ones that I've seen over the years, I've never seen any kind of pattern. Some people said, "Oh, maybe the Australian should have been
redheaded."
Or the blonde for the German. I never really saw any pattern in how they were issued, except that they just had those 3 hair colors and they had brown eyes and blue eyes.
Gotcha.
And then in some cases, you saw regular G.I. Joes issued in some of the foreign uniforms as well.
Okay.
So I've seen a lot of variations. So anyway, today I brought the different ones, so we kind of talk about them a little bit. And I brought some Action Man on a couple of them to kind of make a comparison. This is the British infantry soldier that they created, and really he came with a gas mask bag, a gas mask, canteen, rifle with a clip, and really the only variation in this particular soldier was in the chevrons. Some of the chevrons varied. Some of these guys were issued with paper chevrons and paper patches, and some of them had cloth ones on there. So you'll see that with the British and the Australia in particular. One of the things is this is a very woolly fabric, which is very different than the regular G.I. Joe cotton fabric. So it has kind of a woolly feel to it. It differs from the Action Man version. This is the Action Man version, and you can see his is a more cotton twill type fabric. And the chevrons are very different as well. So his gas mask bag had a rope to tie around the edge. So there were some obvious differences between Action Man. The helmets are all marked Hasbro, whether they're Action Man or not, because a lot of the pieces that the U.S. made, they ended up getting used on Action Man. So any British helmets you see will always have the Hasbro label in it. So anyway, so that's the British infantry soldier. Then my favorite is the Japanese soldier. And I love this guy because I just think he has a great sculpt. He looks really mean. This one's kind of harder to find, I think, than the Nordic. You don't see quite as many Japanese. Tends to bring a little bit more price. Now I've added a couple of Cotswold accessories to mine. I added a bayonet scabbard to it, and I added a canteen to it as well, just to kind of dress it up a little bit. But there's a couple of interesting variations with the Japanese soldiers, and that's in the uniform. Now, this particular uniform I have is the 3-button, and it has 3 gold buttons close together.
Okay.
And then there's another version that has the buttons more spaced out, and they're more of a green button, and it's a little bit harder variation, but it's called the long because the buttons go down below the belt.
Okay.
And also you can see the difference in the leggings. These leggings have a little bit different color and wider elastic pattern in it versus this one, which is very textured and close together. So there's 2 variations of the pants and the leggings. They look a little bit different. And that's how they look next to each other. But this is a great soldier. The hardest part to find for this particular guy is the bayonet. It has the little hook on it. It's almost always broken. So the little hook is very hard to find one altogether. There are some repros on the market, and one of the ways you can tell the difference is the handle on the repro is kind of a glossy black, where the authentic one has kind of a little bit of a texture to it. So anyway, it's one of those things you have to kind of watch out because there are some repros out there.
I think we make them too. So.
Yeah, they've been made by a couple of sources, as a matter of fact. So, but you just have to make sure that you do your homework on that.
So the other ones are generally, the reproductions are generally glossy nipples.
Yeah, you see a little bit of a texture on the handle. It's a little bit different.
Gotcha.
So, but the Japanese is cool. It comes with a backpack. He's got his Order of the Kite medal. Victoria Cross medal came on the British soldier. All these guys came with their respective hero medals on their top, military honors. The next guy on the line is the Australian jungle fighter. He's also a very neat soldier, and he came with the shorts instead of the pants, which was kind of unusual at the time. There weren't any G.I. Joe sets that came with shorts.
No.
And he has the socks. He has the jungle fighter knife. And this particular one I have has the cloth patches. You can see the cloth patches on there. But again, this one came with, they call them foil chevrons, but they're more like kind of a paper that were glued on there. And then he also came with 2 ranks. He came with a corporal rank and a sergeant rank.
Really?
So there's 2 different versions of that. And that's really the only variation in the Australian soldiers is the patches and that type of thing. But he's a really neat soldier as well. Hats, again, marked Hasbro. He's got the regular Marine Jungle Fighter flamethrower on there. And then he also has his medal. So you can see this set's just so unique, and they're very accurate. I read a story about when they got ready to do this set, they sent one of the guys out that worked for Hasbro, and he went to a museum. And they actually had all these uniforms with the exception of the French resistance fighter. And he was able to take them out of the case, do all the measurements, take all the pictures, and that's what these were created from.
Really?
So they were created from actual uniforms in a military museum, which is a lot what Hasbro did with their soldier line too. But on this one, they really did that as well. The only one he couldn't get was the French resistance fighter. And the reason he's dressed the way he is because the French resistance fighters just wore whatever they had. Right, they didn't have a uniform per se, so. The next soldier is the Russian soldier, and he wears his Order of Lenin medal, and he has his machine gun with the bipod. That one has the bipod. This one doesn't. Now, there's a little bit of difference. This one also has the wool type uniform compared to the Action Man knit, cotton fabric, which has a texture. Also, these are much thinner. The epaulets are much thinner on the Action Man. And they're not made out of cloth like the G.I. Joe ones made out of cloth up here.
And they look like they're made out of paper almost.
Yeah, they kind of are. So the uniforms are very different. I say that because if you're getting these, you want to be sure you're getting the right thing. Now on the jackets for Action Man, they're marked tagged Action Man.
Right. But
the hats, for instance, are not. The G.I. Joe hat that is tan is the actual correct Russian hat, whereas the Action Man one is gray. But these don't have a tag of any sort. So if you have a gray one that's actually an Action Man, the tan is the actual Hasbro version. So anyway, and he comes with binoculars, and it came with a ammo case. And they came with some really great accessories. This machine gun's a really nice piece on this. The next is the French resistance fighter. These are kind of hard to find in good shape because these moths tend to love these little sweaters, these little wool sweaters. So I've seen a lot of those things eaten up by the moths. And this is different than the Black Adventure Team sweater because it's a really tight knit, where this is a really loose kind of wool feel to it. So it's a very fuzzy.
Super fuzzy compared to the Spy Island.
Right. He comes with his medal, again, the Victory Cross. Also, he's the brown holster, which is marked Hasbro. And that's, this was a unique holster at the time. They got using some adventure team stuff later, but it was created for this guy. And of course, he's got his knife and his machine gun. And then we have the German infantry soldier, which was originally titled the German Stormtrooper.
Right.
And originally the box had German Stormtrooper on it, but they were afraid that was going to be a little too offensive, so they changed it back to German infantry soldier. And so German soldier comes in a couple of different variations. Those are two different color fabrics. They're both Hasbro US, but one is the earlier version is a little bit lighter, more of an olive drab green. And the later version is it's kind of a really vivid dark green.
Darker green.
Yeah. And there were also some variations on the helmets too. If you turn them to the side right there, turn them to the side where they're great. There were large decals on the helmets and there were small decals. The first run was a small decal. They went to a large decal. And then later they went to, instead of water slide decals like those are, they actually made stickers. And so you'll see a lot of German helmets without any decals on it. It's because the stickers came off. So, but they had variations in the size of that. And that was one of the things. The uniform colors and the helmets are really where the variations are for those guys. And they came with 2 stick grenades, backpack, ammo pouches, and
pistol and holster.
Yeah, pistol and holster. They have their Luger in there, and then the French guy has a Lebel, and so they have and then the Nambu pistol for the Japanese. He has pistol as well in his holster. So. Anyway, those are some of the different variations, and I mentioned how they were packaged, and again, one of my favorite lines. I think they're so interesting. When I was a kid, I had a friend gave me one of these Japanese soldiers, and I didn't really know that much about the line at the time. I got it probably around 68 or 69,
right?
And but then later on, when I got into collecting, I discovered the whole series of them, and they're just some of my favorites. So I wanted to share a little bit about them, a little bit about the history, and show some of the different variations of Action Man compared to US and so forth. So
I was going to ask you some questions, because I'm sure we're probably going to get asked by our viewers out there. As far as boots go, while you're talking, I was looking at the boots for the British, the Japanese, and the Australian, and they're all wearing short brown boots.
Right. Yeah, all short. They all came issued with short brown boots. The Action Man version had black boots, but the US version had the brown boots. And then you had black jack boots for the Russian and for the German. And then the French resistance fighter just came with the short, straight forward G.I. Joe boots.
Just in the short black.
Short black boots, yeah.
So basically the Russian boots are indistinguishable from the German
right, it's
boots.
the same jack boot, yeah, same jack boot, yeah.
And the thing I always thought was funny, because, I used to be a World War II reenactor, and I always thought it was funny that they gave him a K98K rifle ammo pouch, but he had an MP40 machine gun. So,
well, those submachine guns, too, I meant to mention on those are a very difficult piece to find intact. The handles snap and they fold, and those handles are probably 70% of the time those handles are broken or they're missing. And so the guns the rifles are very, very hard to find intact. That's a hard piece on that.
The stock are always broken, or the barrel's always broken on.
And then he's got his Iron Cross medal on too. They came with the Iron Cross medal. The medals are also hard to find where the prongs haven't been bent. A lot of people bent the prongs on the medals, and I typically just leave mine and slide them up under the buttons, so they don't get bent. So I like to have mine that way. But you see a lot of them where they're bent, and if you try to straighten them, you can break them. So it's kind of hard to find the medals intact as well. The Japanese medal is extremely hard to find.
Really?
It's actually the hardest, and I don't know if they made less of the Japanese soldiers. I know they made double of the Victoria Cross medal.
Right.
Some of the medals are much easier to find, but the Japanese medal, to find an original one in good shape, is pretty difficult.
Now, on the German soldiers, the 2 models we have here, which you said this is the earlier model and the later model, they're both that woolly fabric, not that twill fabric.
Right. The Action Man German comes in the twill.
Fabric. So.
Yes, exactly. The Action Man didn't make any of the, in my experience, any of the furry wool.
The woolly.
Not for their soldiers of the world. Yeah, not for the German or the Russian. You can see that they are all like this type of fabric.
Yeah, because what I had studied, because I actually have an Action Man one of this and an Action Man one of this one, and it is that twill. And from what I've studied with Action Man, it's that they started with the twill, And as they progressed, they started making cutbacks in the designs. And the detail, they started using thinner fabric, and then the pouches started,
they got cheaper.
They got cheaper and cheaper. So, but the first ones were really mimicked the original. And when did the Action Man versions come out? Because these came out in '66. Did Action Man come out in '67?
Probably shortly after. I don't have as much experience with Action Man, but like I said, '66 is when the U.S. versions came out, and they only ran 1 year. Like I said, they weren't a big seller, so there was a lot left over to do stuff with.
Yeah.
Well, another variation I wanted to mention too are a couple that I don't have examples of. They're really, really, really difficult to find. There's a first issue British that's called the Woolly Brit, and it's actually kind of a grayish green.
Really?
And it's even a thicker weave fabric than this, and it's called the Woolly Brit. And you don't see it too often. You can see it in a picture in a book every now and then, but it was kind of I don't know if it was a prototype necessarily, but it was definitely a first issue, and they changed the fabric to this as the standard. Okay. And then the same French resistance fighter, believe it or not, I've seen those sweaters in 2 different colors.
Really?
I've seen those sweaters in like a dark purple, and I've seen them in a blue color.
Right.
It's the same sweater, and then I've seen some pictures that people had of some prototypes that they had, and those blue ones and purple ones may have been, but I have seen them in different colors. If you go to 3D Joe's, I think they show a picture of a blue sweater next to the black one, the navy sweater. And so there are some interesting variants to chase out there with these, especially if you like to collect, all the different variations of them.
You can easily go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah. I mean, I started out with 1 of each, and now I have 2 of each.
Yeah.
I had 2 of everything. So you just kind of get to where you do that. And then I wanted the action versions that were close to them. And I really, the foreign ones are some of my favorites. So anyway, that's a little bit about the 1966 Soldiers of the World line.
This is amazing. Like I said, I dabbled in it a little bit here and there, but I really didn't know. And these are the first time I've actually seen the ones with the woolly fabric, because I had the Action Man. It was always twill, so I'd actually assumed the American version was twill as well, but it's not.
Yeah, I will say this: those woolly fabric uniforms are very hard to find in good condition, because they got really dingy, and if you iron them, it ruins them. So it's really hard to find good, clean, original uniform pieces. They're actually pretty plentiful, but to find them in good shape is pretty hard.
So,
yeah, it takes a little while to put
delicate
it together.
Fabric.
It is. It's very delicate, especially over the years. So
cool. Well, this concludes this week's video. Tune in next week. David joining us again, and he will be talking about the Canadian Mountie and the variations that were involved in that one as well. So also make sure that you like this video. Feel free to comment down below if you have any questions or such, and we'll do our best to try to answer them. And also just kind of keep in touch with what's going on with Cotswold Collectibles in our videos. Make sure that you subscribe to our page, to our YouTube channel. That way, next time we put out another video, you get an alert so you can know when to check back in. But basically, that's it. And just tune in next week.